Welcome to the Standlee Premium Western Forage Hay University. Our first topic today will be on Equine 101. The topics that we will discuss today include the different sizes and breeds of horses, some of the many different activities horses are involved in. Then we'll switch and we'll talk about the digestive system that's common to all our equine. And then finally, we'll pause at the end for some interactive questions. Modern horses are represented by many different sizes and breeds, from the very smallest, the miniature horses, to the larger ponies. Then we graduate in height to the light horses, the Warmbloods, and finally the largest of the group of horses, which are the draft horses. With respect to breeds of horses, there are over 105 different breeds of ponies alone that are recognized throughout the world. The smallest of the pony breeds is typically the Shetland. Next, we'll go slightly taller in height to the Pony of America and then the Welsh pony. All ponies share a height of less than 14 hands. A hand is a measurement equivalent to 4 inches at the withers. As we graduate further in height, the next major group of horses are what we call the light breeds of horses. The light breeds of horses are most of the functional horses that people will utilize in their daily activities. And these include many breeds. The single largest breed of horse in the United States is the American Quarter Horse. The American Quarter Horse is very popular breed because it can do a number of different activities. Other light breeds of horses include the Morgan and the Arabian, the Thoroughbred, Standardbred, American Paint Horse, Appaloosa, etc. So there are many breeds of light horses. These horses typically will have a body weight from 850 to 1,250 pounds for most common, and they'll be greater in height than 14 hands, again, and a hand is 4 inches, and that distance is measured from the ground to the top of the withers. The next group of horses, as we move again up the height ladder, are typically what we call the Warmbloods. And Warmbloods are a cross between a cold-blooded horse, which is a draft horse, and a hot-blooded horse, which are the light breeds of horses we previously discussed. So the term Warmblood, meaning the cross between a draft horse and a hot-blooded horse or a light horse breed. Warmbloods are typically larger in both height and carry more weight compared to the average light quarter horse. We have many different breeds of Warmbloods. We have the Hanoverians, the Westphalians, the Belgian Warmbloods, the Dutch Warmbloods, and there are many sub-breeds and categories in these different breeds. A lot of these horses originate from Europe and are very popular for some of the English sports in the United States. And finally, the largest group of horse, both in height as well as weight, are the draft horses. And these, again, are called the cold-blooded horses. Many different breeds of draft horses live in the United States, live around the world. The most common ones in the United States are the Belgians, the Clydesdale, the Shire, and the Percheron. Again, these are draft horses or cold-blooded horses, and they're the largest horse both in size and weight. Next, we're going to talk about some of the many different activities these horses can be involved in. And these are activities that can be involved anything from a mini clear to a draft horse. These are some of the common activities that horse owners will utilize their horses for. Within any of the breeds or size of horses, they are all could be involved in a number of different activities. Each horse could be involved in a growing activity, and these are typically horses from the time of birth through weaning and yearling. Horses will grow to different lengths in age. In other words, will continue to grow to a certain age depending on the breed. But most horses have achieved most of their height, their vertical height, by the time they're 2 years old. So these are the growing horses. Once they're through with growing, then we have a large population of horses that are what's called a mature horse. And a mature horse can do a number of different things. They can be involved in maintenance functions where they're not actively ridden or trained and they're not reproductively active. These horses often will stand in paddocks or stalls and not have too much in their life to do. As we go forward, these mature horses can also be involved in performance. And this performance can be any of the driving, riding, performance activities that horses can be involved in. We also have a group of horses that can be involved in the breeding activities. And breeding activity can be brood mares, and brood mares are actively reproducing from the time of conception through foaling as well as during the lactation or when they're nursing that foal. We can also have breeding animals that are stallions, and stallions have an increased activity both during the breeding season as well as in the non-breeding season. And then finally, the largest single category of horses and a growing category of horses in the United States are those horses which are the senior horses. Now, senior is not defined as a chronologic age because horses will age differently depending on the lifestyle that they've had. Instead, a senior horse is a horse that can no longer eat its normal diet and maintain adequate weight. So that means these horses have lost some sort of dentition or ability to chew their feed, and then they require a separate diet. Now, these many different breeds and sizes of horses can be involved in a number of different activities. And these activities, again, can range from driving type activities, both in a racing form, such as harness racing, or in the draft horses where they're pulling loads. But this can also be involved in the miniature horses where they pull carts, as well as any light horse or pony can pull carts for recreation activities. Then we have the riding activities, and the riding activities can both be English activities as well as Western activities. And the difference between an English activity and a Western activity is just the equipment and what they're asking those horses to do. They can be involved in very precise movements in the English discipline such as dressage. They can be involved in jumping activities, and they can be involved in trail riding activities. On the Western side, they can be involved in any kind of ranch activities, roping, or showing type activities. All of these are considered performance because you're asking the horse to expend energy or to perform a different physical activity. Now, an interesting and very important topic is no matter what the size of the horse, the breed of the horse, the activity, whether it's a mare, whether it's a growing foal, whether it's a senior horse, all of these horses, every single horse needs forage. Their digestive system actually requires forage. Now let's talk about the horse's digestive system. And what I'd like to do is to take you through the horse's digestive system, discuss some of the important features, and with this you'll learn just how important that forage is for a horse. The first important thing to realize about the horse's digestive system is regardless the size of the horse, regardless of the breed of the horse, regardless of the activity or even the owner personality, all of these horses have the exact same digestive system. And that digestive system is shown schematically on the right-hand side of the screen. Every single horse, from a mini to a draft horse, has the exact same digestive system. The relative size of the different organs will vary depending on whether it's a mini or a draft horse, but the actual relative size and scope of the digestive system is the same in all of our equine. The horse has evolved as a free-ranging animal, and that free-ranging animal will eat a wide variety of forages. These horses spend their grazing activity or their feeding activity nibbling. In other words, taking in small, frequent meals over a great amount of time. And horses will actually spend 14 to 20 hours per day in some sort of grazing or some sort of feeding behavior. The other interesting thing about horses is they do not stand in one place when they eat. These horses will move around a paddock or move around a pasture and spend a great deal of energy. A horse that's actually in a pasture 24 hours a day will traveling nearly 10 miles in some sort of feeding or activity of grazing. Now, if we compare the horse and we compare that to a cow does not graze the same way a horse does. They don't spend as long grazing, and they take in large single meals rather than the small nibbling effect that horses have. So with this type of activity that is normal for horses, being turned out in large paddocks, being able to have a free choice access to forage, be able to take in small frequent meals, one of the major reasons that we have nutrition disorders in our horses is because we've simply changed the horse's diet and eating habit. So now no longer can they be turned out on large paddocks to graze and to pick and to choose the forage that they like. They're now kept in stalls. They're not actually convenient for us, but it's very different behavior for the horse. In addition, we've changed the availability of feedstuffs. In a pasture, a horse can choose which is the most nutritious grass or which grass tastes the best. When a horse is in a stalled environment, they get no choice of feed. In other words, they simply eat what we've put in front of them and get no choice in the matter. So the key to understanding how to effectively feed horse is we need to understand the digestive system. The digestive system, what it looks like and how it functions, and that will help keep our horses healthy. The first area of the digestive system is shown here. This is the horse's stomach. There's a long tube that connects the mouth with the stomach called the esophagus. So what do you need to know about the horse's stomach? The horse has a one-compartment stomach, and that stomach is very small in relation to the rest of the digestive system, and also is very small in relation to how large the horse is. The horse's stomach only contains 9% of the total digestive capacity. So the size of the stomach, that small stomach, that dictates meal size. The reason that horses will spend about 17 hours a day in some sort of feeding behavior is because they have to constantly fill and empty this small stomach. What happens from a digestive standpoint? There's a very strong acid, hydrochloric acid, and an enzyme pepsin that begins protein digestion. Now, I mentioned that horses should spend about 17 hours a day in some sort of feeding behavior. And the main reason for this feeding is this horse constantly produces hydrochloric acid. And the number one buffer for this hydrochloric acid in the stomach is saliva from chewing. And when a horse is out grazing or a horse is eating forage, they're producing more saliva than when they eat a similar amount of grain. Now, when horses are out on pasture, they rarely get ulcers, but ulcers are very common in race horses. Over 90% of horses that are in racing activities will have some sort of ulcer associated with the stomach, and over 60% of non-racing performance horses will have some sort of ulceration in their performance career. And this is simply because we've changed the diet of horses. As they become higher in performance, we tend to feed less forage and more grain, and we actually produce horses with ulcers. Now, there are some differences in the type of forage fed as what it will do as far as preventing a gastric or stomach ulcer. We've now found that feeding alfalfa may actually reduce the incidence of gastric ulcer. The reason for this is because alfalfa contains a high calcium content, and calcium has a buffering capacity on hydrochloric acid. Similar to the human over-the-counter antacid Tums, alfalfa has that effect for performance horses, and it is now very common to feed performance horses a small amount of alfalfa prior to exercise to help buffer that acid. for it's the time when horses exercise and that acid is splashed in the stomach that we get the ulcers occurring. So a small meal of alfalfa prior to exercise has a buffering effect on stomach acid. The next area of the horse's digestive system is shown here. This is the small intestine. There's approximately 70 feet of small intestine in an adult horse. The small intestine is shaped very much like a garden hose, and like water through a hose, material moves very quickly through the small intestine in less than 3 hours. The small intestine holds 25% of the digestive capacity of the digestive system. What happens from a digestive standpoint? There are enzymes that are secreted into the small intestine, and these enzymes digest most of the carbohydrate, protein, fat, minerals, and vitamins. The important thing to remember about the horse's small intestine is that material moves very quickly through here, can be from the stomach completely through the small intestine in as little as 3 hours. The other important thing is the small intestine is the area of the digestive system where we want the grain portion of the diet digested. Because this material moves so quickly through the small intestine and we want the grain digested in the small intestine, this is the reason that we process grain prior to feeding it to horses. We roll grain, we crimp grain, we pellet grain, we micronize grain, all processing methods to enhance the surface area so that digestive enzymes can get the grain digested in the small intestine. The last part of the horse's digestive system is the large intestine, and this is a large sacculated or balloon-like structure. It consists of the cecum and colon and holds about 65% of the digestive capacity of the digestive system. Now, it is a large balloon or sacculated area, and it actually slows the rate of passage of food material through this area of the digestive system. I told you food would move through the small intestine in less than 3 hours. Food can be retained in the large intestine for up to 36 hours. This increased time of food retention actually promotes fermentation. There are bacteria or microorganisms that live in the large intestine, and they digest through the process of fermentation. So food material gets to the large intestine, it slows down the rate of passage or the rate of movement in this area and allows bacteria or microorganisms to ferment this. Primarily, these microorganisms ferment plant fiber. So the large intestine is the area of the digestive system where the forage is digested. The hay, the pasture, beet pulp is fermented in this area of the digestive system. Now these microorganisms will ferment fiber, and then they'll produce useful end products that the horse can absorb and utilize. These bacteria will ferment fiber and produce volatile fatty acids that the horse can then absorb and convert to energy. These bacteria also produce all the B vitamins horses need, as well as vitamin K. In the large intestine, we get absorption occurs as well. We get absorption of water, electrolytes, and phosphorus. So the large intestine is the area of the digestive system where the fiber is digested, and the small intestine is the area where the grain is digested. Now, what would happen if we fed a horse too much grain in a single meal, or he broke into the feed room and helped himself? This would be a medical emergency. The reason being that the grain is not properly digested in the small intestine. We've eaten too much. It spills into the large intestine, and these bacteria will ferment the grain. But unfortunately, when bacteria ferment grain, instead of producing a weak volatile fatty acid, they produce a very strong acid, lactic acid, which ends up killing the bacteria. These bacteria release a toxin, and we can get a digestive upset, a colic, or a laminitis that occurs. So remember, the small intestine is designed for digestion of grain, and the large intestine is where we want the fermentation of forage products. To summarize the horse's digestive tract, we have a horse that has a small, simple stomach, which is designed for small, frequent meals. This horse has a large, sacculated, or balloon-like hindgut dedicated to the digestion of fiber. So taken together, horses were born to graze with quality of fiber, a critical element to their digestive health. So horses are basically animals that are designed anatomically. Their digestive tract is designed primarily to digest and utilize forages. The last part of this will be done with some interactive questions. I have prepared some questions for you that you should be able to answer. So we will now do that part of the test. The first question is a true or false question. Forage requirements for horses are based on breed. True or false? Okay, we know this is false. Forage requirements are not based on breed. They're based on the size of the animal. All horses actually require forage. So regardless of breed, they're not based on, that does not determine the forage content or the forage content of the diet. The next question, again, a true or false question. Dressage horses can only eat orchard grass products. True or false? That is false. Horses can eat many, many different types of forage. We will discuss forage in more depth and the types of forage in more depth in other presentations. But horses can eat all kinds of forage and aren't strictly reliant on one type. Question 3. The horse is designed to be a grazing animal. True or false? This is absolutely true. Horses, again, when turned out, will be involved in grazing behavior for about 17 hours a day. Small, frequent meals of forage is anatomically how the digestive system of the horse is designed. Question 4, true or false? Alfalfa may reduce the incidence of gastric ulcers. This is true. Remember, the high calcium content in alfalfa will actually buffer hydrochloric acid, which is produced in the stomach. So a small meal of alfalfa prior to exercise is actually therapeutic for gastric ulcers. Question 5. Enzymes ferment fiber in the large intestine of the horse. This is actually false. Remember, enzymes are in the small intestine and they digest grain. It's bacteria or microorganisms in the large intestine of the horse which actually ferment plant fiber. This concludes the first installment of Understanding Forage at Hay University, sponsored by Standlee Premium Western Forage. Should you have questions, you can actually email those to us at customerservice@standleeforage.com. You can also call and talk to one of our representatives at 800-398-0819. Again, thank you for attending Standlee Premium Western Forage, Hay University.